Okay, so technically we're live.
We're live,
Um,
baby.
we are live. All right. Well, welcome to Second Nature Podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and I have a special guest today, Matt Maleschuk, with us. How you doing, Matt?
Fantastic, brother. Happy to be here.
Good, good. That's what I like to hear. Matt reached out to me about a week and a half ago or so, and he listened to my podcast and he related a lot to it. He's been through some of his own struggles. Him and I played. We had a brief stint together in Okotoks, probably what, like 2, 3 months or something?
Yeah, 2, 3 months. And then, I think we ended up bumping into each other quite a bit off and
Yeah.
on the following year. But yeah, I think it was only 3 months we played together.
Yeah. So we played together for a little bit, but then, of course, probably saw each other out and about on
Yeah.
the weekends, weeknights, whatever night it was. So I think I want to just start by kind of let's go through um, what kind of happened maybe during while you're playing and maybe afterwards, and just kind of how your addiction evolved. And then wherever it takes us, we can just go from there. If that works for you.
Yeah, for sure. Um, like for sure prevalent throughout my life. Um, Multitude of difficulties, mental health challenges, but specifically to playing at hockey, like for me, um, I think hockey culture naturally allows drinking to be kind of an early entrance for everyone. Like from the time I remember, like 13, 14, Bantam is when I think the parties really started to become a regular weekend thing. And there's always was a house available, or someone could get a hold of booze, and it was more just a casual thing that everyone did. And it just, I think, progressed and became more of a um not an expectation, but a part of the culture, I guess. You're around it, and I think for me, it was to be a part of the cool group or whatever. But I really felt like I wanted to always be a part of the team, be a part of the boys, and just wanted to be close to that. And if it was going to a party, drinking, I was in. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, sorry, go ahead.
it's a team bonding thing, right? Like
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
you get into it and a couple people do it and then kind of more and more, and then you get where it's kind of every weekend or every night you get a chance to. It's kind of just what you do. You play and then you go party. And
Oh,
I think, yeah, growing up in your starting in your kind of middle teens, it's easy to get like caught up in that. And okay, well, I love the game of hockey, but I also love going out and like you have fun and all that kind of stuff. And you don't really care about anything else that's going to come down the road.
exactly.
Um, right. So that, so that happened. Right. And then, kind of how did it evolve throughout that? Cause you went and played junior and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, and just kind of what was the progression there?
So when I got to junior, I think when I was 17, it was really, I quickly started to identify that I was I was not drinking like everyone else around me. I was a heavy binger. I was always drinking to get as drunk as I possibly could. Um, and I naturally clung to a lot of the older guys I played with. Like, starting junior at 16 or midget AAA at 16, you're starting to be around older guys, especially junior 17, 18, 19, 20. Um, at 17, I found myself regularly drinking with the 20-year-olds. And they were doing it more often because they were men. They were further along in their lives. And I think I found it exciting that they were doing it more, and it was an opportunity for me to be around it more, because I wanted it more, and I enjoyed alcohol really did for me, and how it made me feel, and how it kind of lifted a lot of my insecurities and anxieties that I carried throughout my life. But like 17 was when it started. The doors really opened. The
Yeah.
floodgates were opening. Um, and then 18 being legal. Not that that stopped me before, but
Yeah, exactly.
it was just like that much more comfortable and that
Yeah.
much easier on a weeknight to go to a bar and like go for wings with the guys, or I even found myself often just by myself. Um,
Yeah.
and at that point, I never identified it as a problem or anything. I just wanted to feel good and would kill time, would wanted to keep chasing it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I I I relate to that big time. It's you start to hang out with older guys, and if that's what they're doing, right? Everywhere we go, we want to have that feeling of acceptance, right?
for sure.
So it's especially with those older guys, and especially in a hockey dressing room. And we kind of played junior right in that range where there was starting to be some changes in
Yeah,
like the hazing and all that kind of stuff. So I know for me, I never got it that bad, or we like as rookies, we never got it. Like we had to load the bus and do all those things, which is, I think, something that the rookies need to do. But
yeah,
there's other stuff, and just to be able to get into that group of the older guys, and
yeah.
especially for someone like myself, like yourself, with those insecurities, it's just like it makes it that much better for us. So if this is kind of what we need to do to get in there, like we're gonna go along with it, right?
100%. And
Mhm.
you hit the nail on the head with the acceptance thing, because I mean, for me, that was something like I think throughout my whole life, but especially in hockey and being around older guys that I looked up to or admired, it was something I deeply longed for, was like acceptance of my peers and like strong men around me.
Yeah,
So for sure, like I was in,
yeah,
wasn't a question of that. I just wanted to do whatever I needed to do to be a part of it.
yeah. And then unfortunately for people like ourselves who are maybe aware, but most likely are unaware of the necessity that our bodies can create
Yeah.
for the need for alcohol, right?
Yeah.
So for some people, it's okay. It's like, yeah, well, I'll get in there and I'll do it and everything's fine.
Yeah.
But for people like us, you don't really understand what you're kind of doing and where this is potentially leading. So it kind of is just like, okay, we're living in the moment, we're here and now, but we're not looking to the future consequences behind it all.
100%. And it was just, it was purely acting on a whim all the time. Right. And it was chasing, for me, it was escape, right? It was escape and like self-medicating pain and traumas. But at the time, I think 17, 18, it was more escape. Um,
Mhm.
and I, I didn't like how I felt regularly. I was always uncomfortable. I was very insecure, and I had, a giant weight I felt I was carrying around all the time, and this pit inside of me that I I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to deal with it. And I know drinking made me feel good. It gave me
Yeah.
a release, and it gave me a false sense of who I am and who I could be, and allowed me to fit into those crowds we wanted acceptance from, right?
Yeah.
So
Um, have you so you say that you didn't know what it was that you're trying to fill. Have you been able to kind of think back on that now that you've had some sobriety, and have you been able to understand what that might have been?
yeah, yeah, like I'm really blessed, Mike, to have had the path I've gone down, because in that was a lot of difficulty, a lot of tough times, but I've been able to do a lot of healing and a lot of a lot of work, which I needed to. But I think for me, I, I always dealt with a lack of self worth. Um,
Yeah.
from the time I was a kid, and just kind of got worse and worse as I got older, and had different things happen to me, and remember feeling like worthless, and like less than others. Like low self-esteem was always very prevalent for me. And I think the acceptance thing, right? And I mean, that goes into a lot of different aspects where it kind of intertwines in my life, my childhood, family life, whatever it may be. But I think that constant yearning to, uh, want to make people proud, make my family proud, um, fit in with the group, the guys, with girls, whatever it may be. But I think ultimately it really was, I needed to accept myself for who I am, and I needed to be okay with that and love myself. And at that time I just wasn't, because whether, it's society and learned things throughout life, I think I identified that how I was feeling, who I was, wasn't really uh accepted, or wasn't going to get me what I wanted.
Mhm.
Whether it's, being an emotional, um highly emotional kid, highly emotional guy, sensitive to a lot of things. And yeah, so I mean, life hardened me up, and I kind of
Yeah,
hit all that.
exactly. And kind of the world we were living in the hockey world, growing up in that. And then, especially when you go in to play junior, it's kind of, we were taught like man up and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. And,
exactly.
like, you're not emotions. What are emotions? What is vulnerability? Right?
Yeah.
Like, everybody's okay. And then you're you're here for the team, you're part of the team, what can you do for the team, right? So there's kind of those pressures that you get put on yourself, and it's, if you're someone who thinks things or overthinks things a lot,
Yeah.
right? Then it's easy to just kind of be like, I can't handle this. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to go, but I know that this substance takes all that away,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think the fear too, right? The fear of someone finding out, or,
Mhm.
maybe you say a little too much. And like you said, it's a culture that we grew up in, of like alpha male, don't show weakness. And
Yeah.
if you do, you're a pussy. That's the word that was used. And the last thing I wanted was any extra attention drawn to me, especially negatively, because you've seen yourself, like how that stuff can stick with someone, and the guys won't let you forget it, or
Yeah.
people talk. It's a small world, hockey world. And I just wanted to fit in, didn't want to draw any extra attention to me, and I wanted to make everyone happy around me. That's really what I wanted.
Exactly, exactly, and, like, I look back on, like, my playing, and as you get older, like, you do things because other people have done things too, right? Like, I think back on some of the, like, jokes I made and all that kinda stuff
Yep.
in the dressing room, and, like, at the time, I knew I was going through some shit, but it was like, well, it's easier to project onto someone else. And stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a never-ending cycle of repetition
Yep.
of guys come in, they want that acceptance. Then as they get older, they think they got to turn around and do it to the same to or do the same thing, right? So
Yep.
so I've thought back a lot on that kind of stuff, and like I don't let it give me shame about it anymore, because I think I'm in a better place now where I can understand that you were you, but you weren't quite,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I can relate to that too. And I look at that too, and I think of like our coaches. Um, like exactly what you said. It's like, how could I fault them for anything? Because they're just doing what they learned, what they went through, and it's like you said, it's a cycle, and it seems to just
Exactly.
keep coming. And that's why that culture, I think, is very difficult to change, because it's just deeply ingrained. And I'm sure it's gotten better. I'm pretty removed from it now, but
Yeah.
all I know is what I went through, right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
Exactly. And like you can look back and like we all know those guys who blame, right? Blame everybody else and
yeah,
like, oh well, this coach didn't like me and that coach didn't like me and that's why I didn't make that team. And like I could sit here and do the same thing for coaches I had. Oh, they didn't want to play me here. I could have been there, but there's no point to it, right?
yeah,
Like sitting here and blaming others, like I was the one who was in control of my actions at the end of the day,
yeah,
right? Like nobody literally force fed us beers or whatever it was,
yeah,
right? Like we were the
yeah,
ones who we chose to do it.
yeah,
Maybe we didn't have the best guidance or the best support systems, but at the end of the day, we made the choices for ourselves. And that's something that's really let me let go of a lot of that resentment and regret I had towards hockey
yeah,
because it's it's not worth it to carry it around,
yeah,
right? And for years I was carrying it around and it just got worse and worse and that's kind of where I led into the mental health issues and the
yeah,
anxiety and all that kind of stuff and the depression. Um you had mentioned in our pre-talk that those were something that you had to deal with too. Could you just maybe take us through a little bit of how that evolved and whether that was while you were playing or after or just kind of anything
yeah,
in that regard?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can remember from, uh, I think the earliest I remember like depression being involved in my life, I was grade 9, so I think that's 13.
Yeah.
Um, Always was anxious, very anxious kid, and very prevalent in my life. But I mean, in hockey, it just, I think hockey really heightened all of that for me, especially the anxiety. I mean, I was walking around with it all day, every day, but the added pressures, I mean, in Calgary being, you're on a pedestal if you're on those top teams. Even if you're 12, 13 years old, people know about you. You start getting scouted for the Western League. And I think for me, definitely an overthinker for sure.
Hmm.
So those just constantly were going in my head, and that desire to make everyone around me proud, my family. Um, Anxiety really picked up for me in my teens, and really started to become like a, more crippling,
Yeah.
and really started to manifest itself in like it troubles with my image. Just simple things like having a real difficult time looking in the mirror and like picking myself apart.
Yeah.
Never really being satisfied with anything I could do, whether it's not being good enough in school, not performing on the ice, not dressing properly. Like it sounds crazy, but like that's the
Yeah.
type of shit that was going on in my head. Right. And that became like a daily thing that just got worse and worse and worse. And along with that was depression. And I would have deep depressive spells where it's difficult to get out of bed. Your body hurts. I'm achy. I'm like going through intense sadness, very melancholy. And it's not like, but I think the way that I explain it, because I think depression can awfully often be confused with, just being sad or whatnot. But it's definitely not that. It's not something I choose to feel. It's something like I wake up in the morning and a switch is off, and there's something in my body that everything is down. The moods are down. It's like a rain cloud's following me. Could be sunny, but it is just stuck there. Um, And for me, like, it didn't matter if I exercise, if, I do positive things, it was always there. Um, and that really my depression really escalated, um, throughout my teens and into junior, um, especially when I turned 18, 19 was really when things took a big turn for myself. Things were bad. It just kept getting worse. But, uh, when I had a real bad concussion at 19, that kind of ended my hockey career. That's really when things just took a different path. And I really was, not the same person after that. Um, and yeah,
Right. So, yeah, the shake it off, right? That just it's not possible when you're in that, right?
no,
And I think that's something fortunately some people don't experience depressive episodes and that kind of stuff, and
yeah,
I can imagine being one of those people and how hard it can be to,
yeah,
like, see somebody who's going through just what you explained, right? Can't get
yeah,
out of bed, doesn't wanna do anything, and feel like that's, "Okay, well, let's go do something. Let's do something about this," right?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's part of what I wanna do here and kind of moving forward is, like, not just talk about and help people who are going through it, but also maybe help those who don't experience it, understand
yes,
it, and be able to support people in a better way, right? Like, I'm not a psychiatrist or a
yeah,
counselor or anything, right? I don't per, per se know the exact reasons, but it's just kind of like creating conversation around that so you can see and you can understand what someone else is going through, right? That
yeah.
empathy, compassion, right? Um, so you said, what did you end off with again there?
So my concussions
Right.
that
Concussions.
really like propelled
Right.
everything.
So was that your first kind of major one when you were 19 or?
No, I had them regularly throughout my career from like 14, 15, I had one with like a few documented. And then I think as I got like 16, 17, and I've been through that concussion
Yeah.
protocol enough, which at the time, it really was a joke. It's just
Yeah.
like a sheet of paper, like you can breeze through it, no problem.
Yeah.
I really figured that out, that that was a joke, and that a lot of my concussions were very routine in terms of how I healed. It's like 30 days, headache for 3 weeks, and then it would start to subside. I'd still feel groggy, shitty, but I'd get back to things. So I would just shake them off.
Mhm.
And sometimes I wouldn't even tell anyone, and I would just
Yeah.
keep playing or whatnot. And so there was definitely, uh, multiples of them. I don't know how many. I would say probably close to double digits. Couple really bad ones ended up in the hospital, knocked out. But
Yeah.
the last one I had, uh, it knocked me to a different planet. I mean, it was I could feel inside of me like something was wrong, and it set off like a I guess it was fear. Like I was actually really scared because I could just feel it, and I was having symptoms that I hadn't experienced before, like the severity of my headaches, of the nausea, like my balance,
Mhm.
and even like light sensitivity. I like it was just like piercing to be in a room with certain lights, and then the mood factor was off the charts. Like I knew I had depression and wasn't feeling good before that, but it was just like everything overnight became a huge issue. Um, so I mean for me it was I can definitely admit I was alcoholic before then,
Yeah.
for sure. But this just really like put me on a rocket ship because now I thought things were bad. Things got really bad. And I also had this physical pain. with these headaches that I was experiencing, that I started really self-medicating for that. And that's really when drinking became more of a necessity to function,
Mhm.
versus escape. Um, and it just like became more and more, and I couldn't get enough. And without it, I was miserable. With it, I was miserable, but it still was something to me that was relieving me of pain to a certain degree still. Um,
So so you go through that. Did you have any help with, like, the concussion stuff? Like, were you seeing a doctor, or was there anything there?
yeah, so I was fortunate when I was in my early teens, we got hooked up in a study at U of C, and there was this concussion specialist. Can't remember the guy's name, but he was a pretty big deal. He did a lot of work with NHL,
Mhm.
and so I went back to him after like 2 months of just really having a difficult time, and it was really disappointing because it was at that time the concussions were still this thing that you just filled out a form, and it's like, what are your symptoms? Oh, 10, or read this back and forth, memorize this. So I saw him for weeks and nothing really came out of it. He got me in some treatments that didn't help. Um, but ultimately, after seeing him for a few months, and summer was ending, I wasn't able to work out. I wasn't able to train and get ready for the season. And honestly, I didn't really care. I was just scared what's going on with me. I didn't know what the fuck was happening with me. I was too scared to tell anyone, um, because I thought I was getting ready for season, right?
Right,
So
right. You think you're gonna go back to it. Did
yeah,
When you're going through that and, like, getting that help with the concussion stuff, did they talk about depression or anxiety or drinking or any of that?
no, no,
No.
it was totally like nothing, you
So
know.
I would Yeah, so they're, like, just looking at, "'Kay, problem is he's concussed,"
Yes,
right?
and
And that
sit in a dark room. If I hear
sitting
sit in a dark room one more fucking time, I tell you, like,
it Oh my god, I know, right?
yeah,
Oh, sit in a dark room for what? The next 10 years of my life?
yeah.
Um,
Because that's a good place for a guy who's already crazy up here. Just put me in a dark
yeah.
room alone, you know?
I'm already got darkness inside of me. I don't need it surrounding me. Right. So that's yeah, you can kind of look at that and be like, okay, we're looking at the problem straight on.
Yeah,
And this is where this is the problem. These are what we think is going to help it. Whereas it's probably so much more of all that other stuff that we've just talked about. Right.
absolutely. Yeah, and
Right.
like, it took me years and lots of work, and ultimately took sobriety to get healing there, but there are so many levels to the brain trauma I had. Like,
Mhm.
there's the physical pain, there's the cognitive stuff, and then there's the mood stuff. Like,
Mhm.
it is like a uh, so many parts, right? Like, it's not just taking a pill or getting a treatment for the headaches. Like, I really had to, do a lot of like cognitive behavioral stuff to rewire, um, so many parts. Like, I remember I could barely even go into like a Costco or a superstore, because it would just be so overloading to me, and like my mind, I would just go blank. Like, there wouldn't be anything there. I'd forget what I came in for, or I'd leave with like 2 things and I needed 30. Um,
Yeah.
and I just needed to get the hell out of there because I started having like panic, and
Mhm.
it was just crazy, like total overload.
Right. Yeah. Your anxiety would, and I remember having those feelings being in spaces. Not necessarily when I had, like, a head injury, but just when I was, like, in my darkest moments, like, "Get
Yep.
me out of here. I can't be surrounded by people."
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. It's
And like, I had concussions in that too, and And I remember, like, at the end stages of my drinking and drug use, yeah, not being able to remember anything.
Yeah.
Like, I was in school, couldn't try to read, nothing's registering. And then, like, it was turning into headaches. Like, if
Yeah.
I tried to concentrate on things, I would start to get headaches. And it was like, there's no point in me studying because nothing is staying in there.
Yeah.
And like, so I can relate to you there. Um, what, what was kind of, so you ended up not playing that next season, I'm guessing?
Yeah. I just physically was in a fucking bad place. And then meanwhile, with all this concussion stuff I'm dealing with, I mean, my drinking just skyrocketed, right? It was becoming pretty much daily. Um, and yeah, I was in no shape. And I honestly, I knew something was going on in my head. Physically, something was wrong, but I was at the point too where it really felt like a burden to go back to playing hockey because I needed time to medicate myself to drink.
Yeah.
Like, that routine was built up, and I was thinking in my head, how am I going to fit hockey into this? Like, I can't. Right.
Right.
And it was really still, I think I had a lot of it hidden at that point, or I
Hmm.
thought I did. Um, and I really was self-conscious for people to know about it, how bad it was getting and what I was doing. Um, so I think a part of that too was like, I don't want anyone, around the rink knowing that this is what I'm doing or this is who I am. Like to me at that time, it was embarrassing. Like I had a lot of shame
Right.
regarding that.
So, yeah. So you can't get proper help. So you turn to what does help, which unfortunately is drinking.
Right.
And then what that turns into is fear,
Yes.
right? And then what fear stops us from doing a lot of things, right? It's kind of, I think it's the number one thing out there that's, especially for myself, it's like fear of what other people will think, fear of,
Yep.
can I do this? Fear, whatever, you can relate it to anything. So what kind of happened after that and you had that fear and you were drinking? What did those next kind of months or years or however long, what kind of entailed there?
Yeah. Well, I loved what you said about fear. First of all, because fear for me is really the root of a lot of my problems, right? Like anxiety to me is just constant fear of unknown and
Yeah.
whatnot. But yeah, like my life really, at that point, it was kind of like I went over the cliff. Once hockey was done for me, and the big thing for me is I was totally lost in life because up to that point, being someone with no self-worth, um, outside of Matt, the hockey player, uh,
Right.
like that was what I built my life around. That was how I felt I received love, respect, admiration from friends, family was through hockey and hockey performance. That's what was ingrained in me in my life. And when I lost the identity of Matt, the hockey player, it was really like, holy fuck. Like I was just lost and I was devastated too. I really was. I felt a great resentment to the game. Um, how I went out, it was out of my control and it was out of my control, but I
Yeah.
probably could have done a lot more to mitigate things. But yeah, it went down a deep, dark path of a lot of shame, a lot of regret, a lot of guilt. Um, I felt like I let down, my family, for like, this is it. I had nothing to show for. And they made a lot of sacrifices to put me through the game. And I blame myself a lot too, because I, I guess that like self-hatred, really developed for me and I felt like worthless. I didn't feel I added any value to life anymore. Um, and those next few years was really just, uh, it was just a lot of escape and, daily drinking. And it just
Mhm,
kept escalating and escalating, more quantity, and going further down the scale.
mhm.
Um, but I think what I wanted to say, um, I'm blanking here.
'Kay.
There was something
Uh,
there.
it'll come back.
Yeah,
Yeah, you wrap so much of your life around Matt the hockey player or
yeah,
Mike the hockey player,
yeah,
and then it doesn't work out,
yeah,
and there's a there's essentially a grief
yes,
factor, right?
yeah,
Like, you've done this since you were 5, 4 years old, and
yeah,
it's like, even if even if it wasn't what you should be doing,
yeah,
right? You're still like, "Well, that was me, and
yeah,
that's what I was doing, and
yeah,
that was giving me worth, maybe not self-worth,
mhm,
but it was giving me something to hold on to."
mhm,
And then as soon as it's gone, it's like, "Whoa, now what do I do?" Like, I remember having days and, like, moments where I literally thought, "I don't know anything else.
yeah,
I don't know, like, how am I gonna where am I gonna go get a job? What am I gonna do?" Like, I had no understanding of, like, how the world worked
yeah,
because I was so focused in this, and you don't realize, like, well, you go and they hire you and they train you and then you do all this stuff. But it was like my own mental problems, right? Depression, all that kind of
yeah,
stuff. But then also mixed in with those thoughts, you're kind of like, I'm trapped. I don't know
yeah,
where to go. Okay. And for me, it was, okay, well, here's an offer to go coach a Bantam AAA team. It's like, okay, well, I always thought maybe I could get into coaching afterwards.
mhm,
And then you move into that and you're just kind of continuing on, right? With those same things. It's not really bringing you what you want. Like, you think you want it, but you
yeah,
don't deep down inside. And
yeah,
it's kind of just a continuation, but it's because you don't know what else to do. Right.
absolutely.
So kind of what, what, what did you get right into after that? Like,
Well, I was fortunate. I had a job. I was landscaping for Peters, and
mhm,
that I'm really blessed that I had that. I didn't really like it.
no,
I didn't really like it at all. But I stuck with it, and it was kind of almost like a safe place for me because I had such a great relationship with Jeff Peters, and he's
yeah,
such an integral part of my life. And I
yeah,
mean, really, I look back on it now, and it was probably my biggest blessing was being under someone who could keep an eye on me, cared
yeah,
about me.
yeah,
Um, but aside from work, like for me, like you just brought up a little inspiration because when I really tried to keep hanging around the guys and I tried to stay involved somehow. But for me, that was just going to the parties, the
yeah,
extracurriculars, right? Um, and I really started to separate myself from normal drinker versus what I would drink.
yeah,
So I really saw how what I was bringing, was a different level than what everyone was at in terms of how regular, how often, and no one wanted to be a part of that, right? And I started to get really shameful and and hit it. And distanced myself entirely after about the first year. I really avoided everyone, because I was embarrassed and I just knew, I didn't want to tarnish my image. I don't know why that meant so much to me, but I felt like I wanted to hide it and keep it to me. So I began really isolating, and that's when
yeah,
I did a lot of drinking on my own too.
yeah. Man, this is man, it feels like we live the same life, dude.
It's crazy. I felt that when I was listening to your podcast, man.
Because like, that was the exact same things that I felt, right?
Yeah.
You take away hockey, and then the drinking career finally gets to flourish,
Yeah.
and it gets over so overdone, and you don't realize, like, you think everyone's drinking like you do or using like you do
Yeah.
or whatever it is, but you have no idea that people shut it down at 12:30 or like, "Oh, no, I'm good for the night," right?
Yep.
Um, and then exactly, like, I talk about how those relationships with my closest friends are the ones that are, like, the most important to me, and I'm pushing those people away
Yep.
because they don't want to deal with any of it, right? They
Well,
want to
yep.
go
That,
ahead.
and I mean, for me too, like, if anyone was trying to help me or trying to get me to stop, I didn't want any of that around, right? Because I needed
Yes.
to get what I wanted, what I needed.
Mhm.
So I was the same, right? I pushed friends away. I pushed, especially my family,
Yeah.
right? That's when I really distanced myself from them and essentially was alone. Um,
Yeah.
that's where my addiction wants me, right? Alone.
Correct. Right? Like, yeah, it wants you all to yourself, all to itself
Yeah.
so that you can continue because I believe it knows that those other people still care about you and they still love you and they're going to want to end it.
Yeah.
So it's a battle, right? Between your addiction and those people. And it's not something like your family and friends could look at it and be like, "Oh, well, he doesn't want to be around us. He doesn't love us." Like,
Yes.
but really it's no, you're taking yourself away from from those interactions because you've got so much self-hate and all
Yep.
that kind of stuff because you know what you're doing to yourself and what it's putting into their world,
Yep.
right? So you start to isolate, take yourself away so that you don't have to see or they don't have to see that side of you.
Yep. They don't have to see it, and they ain't gonna fucking stop me, right? When I'm in
Yes.
that mode, it's like, get out of here because I ain't stopping.
Yeah. Right. So that goes on for a few years.
Yeah. So let's see, 20, 21, 22, 23. Yeah. So good 4 years of really just being in limbo and just continuing down the decline
Mhm.
hitting points of no return in terms of like my usage and different experiences I'm putting myself in and
Yeah.
like just the consistency, the regularity of it. But I was very highly functioning. And I think this is maybe one we differ a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how, but I was always able to, whatever it was, drink all night, blackout, and just somehow I would wake up and I would just go to work. It would suck. It would be, horrible, but
Yeah.
somehow I was able to keep doing it. And so I was able to keep a little bit of a lure that
Yeah.
everything was okay. And that really contributed greatly to my denial.
Right.
Because like, look, I'm working, right? Who
Yeah.
cares? I'm drinking every day. I've gained 50 pounds. There's no one's around, right? I'm working.
Yeah.
I'm making money. I'm good.
Yeah.
Um, so I've talked about it a lot with my counselor too, and I think it's a blessing and a curse in a sense, because it really probably postponed a lot of things for me because I kept that allure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
So what kind of I get what you're saying there, right? So you think it was just like me, I'm a binge drinker. So
yeah,
I don't have a problem, right? Like if I wake up on that Sunday or that Monday and drink again to make myself feel good,
yeah,
that's me. That means I'm an alcoholic,
yeah.
right?
Whatever it is, right? Like those little weird things we convince ourselves, which is just like it's like insane people thinking, right? Because anyone
Exactly.
else would look at it and be like, "What the fuck are you justifying?" Right?
Yeah.
But for us,
Yeah.
it's like, "Yeah, we're good. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The addictive reasoning, right?
Yeah.
Like, "No, no, I'm stopping today and I'm gonna be sober for 3 days, so there's no way I have a problem." Although
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell myself, "Nah, I'm never gonna drink again. That's it, I'm done,
Yeah."
because I feel so bad right now." But
Or
then 2 days come along and it's like, "Well, you know what? We're feeling good," right?
my favorite is, switching from whiskey to vodka. Like, "Oh, I'm not even drinking whiskey, like, it's good." Meanwhile, I got 2 bottles of vodka put down.
At least it's clear,
Yeah.
less calories.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so what starts to switch?
So what happened was really when I was 22, 23. So I was actually in a serious relationship with a girl at 21, and ended up living with her for about a year, year and a half. And I think that's when things really just like were exposed. Um, she was really privy to what my life looked like because I was living with her. So she was around it all the time, and she was around the difficulties I was having, and she saw it firsthand. And as things were going down, it kind of came to a culmination where she left, and rightfully so. I don't blame her, but I came home and everything was gone, and being like the self-loathing, self-pity uh point I was at, like it just hurt me and devastated me a whole heck of a lot. And at that point, I had no accountability to absolutely anyone. It was
Okay,
it was really just me in my condo, and I had work, but I had a lot of free time. And for me, it was like, okay, this is it. Like, um, she left me, all about me, right?
yeah,
Never any accountability, but
yeah,
she doesn't want me anymore. Fuck her. Like, poor me. Um, I lost my hockey career. I lost this. My family doesn't love me. They don't understand me. I'm not like anyone else. I don't know what the fuck's going on with me. And there was like a 8-month window there I had, um, before I got checked into treatment, where it was a very dark time, and very alone. And I started really, um, having like financial damage. My addiction was really manifesting itself in so many different ways. It's just like the drinking was one thing, but then gambling became a thing, and these toxic relationships, sexually or just codependent relationship. And yeah, and food too. Like I gained like 50 pounds after hockey throughout my early 20s, and I became this just like gross, useless person. And
mhm,
I was miserable, and really it was I'd had like suicidal ideation in my life before.
mhm,
But this is when it got really dark for me, and it became like a legitimate option and a legitimate ultimatum to escape this. Because in my mind, I was drinking was not fun anymore. That was a long,
yeah,
long past, right? I
yeah,
was creating more and more wreckage. And it was like the more I would get, it just wasn't enough. Um, and as I would just keep going down this pit and this cycle, um, that option of not being here anymore, or taking my life, however you want to look at it, started to become a very regular and almost satisfying thought.
right,
As sick as that sounds, but that is truly what was going on in my head. And um as the time went on, I had a real dark time, dark moment, and was fortunate that, it didn't go that way, but, I ended up making a phone call,
Right.
and, in a deep, dark night where, I had made plans to take care of it, to end it, and formulated a plan how I was gonna do it, what I was gonna do, which was different than before. It went from a
Yeah.
thought to, um, action, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I was fortunate in that in the midst of all that, I had some pretty divine, intervention, what I call it. And I had a pretty sobering moment at a moment where I don't think I deserved, the clarity I had. But I had enough clarity to make a phone call, and I called my mom.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and yeah, it's crazy because she picked up, which was a miracle in its own right.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things going on in our lives where she wasn't in town for a while. The fact that she was in town at that time and she picked up and of course, um, came and got me and some things happened that ultimately led me to getting into treatment.
Right. And yeah, things happen for a reason, man.
Yeah, of
Right. Um, Thank you for sharing that because
course.
that's the kind of stuff that people need to hear is no matter how bad or those thoughts that you have, right? And you think that's the good idea.
Yeah,
I mean, I had those too, and it, it's so hard to come back from it. Or, but luckily you saw that little light and whatever that was, right?
yeah,
That stopped you from doing that. And then you end up calling the person who brought you into this world, right?
yeah,
Right? And no matter what you've kinda what your relationship looked like at that point, right? I'm sure she didn't hesitate to come
100%.
and get you,
Yeah,
right? And that's tough because I know some people might not have that,
yeah,
but it's like that's something that needs to be addressed as well as like those hotlines and
yeah,
like people in your life, making sure that you have those systems.
yeah.
Um, so that was essentially your rock bottom
For that time, yeah,
for that time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it was a bottom. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a bottom, and I still view it as, having 2 different trips to treatment. I still view that time as really my darkest moment,
Yeah.
in my life, but, I mean, naturally, I had another progression that took me low, but,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a horrific
Let,
time.
let's let's stay on that on the topic of the
Yep.
first time though. So you make that call and then so I'm guessing your mom picks you up and then you find a treatment center.
Yeah.
So it's your choice, right? You wanna go, you wanna do
Well,
it, and then
here's the thing about that is it
yeah,
really wasn't, I would say, my choice.
okay,
For the life of me, I don't think about a lot anymore, but I still am kind of haunted by that night and how I went from this weird clarity to like, holy fuck, my life is out of control. Like I am literally, I look what I'm about to do to myself. Like this is crazy.
yes,
Like, and I kid you not, when my mom got there, it was like I got in the car and gone. I don't recall after that. I
yeah,
went from having this really clear mind and seeing things, and then it was like blackout mode again.
mhm,
So I don't remember the conversation, what happened, but I remember my parents just got on the ball and rolling. They're like,
Right.
here's the number. You just need to call and say you want to be there. And, but I didn't want to go. And
Yeah.
really, when I snapped to it the next day, I was just back doing the same thing. Like I wasn't like, I'm going to go get help. That wasn't in my head. But, ultimately, within the next few days, I did make the decision that I'm going to go. And it was a
Yeah.
very naive thinking.
Mhm.
I think at the time I really thought, okay, this is going to get me my relationship back. This is going to fix my life.
Yeah.
I'm going to come out and be good.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like a willingly going to get better. I never felt that inside of me. It
Yeah.
was to get things back. And
Yeah.
that's how I looked at it.
Yeah, you're looking at the outcomes that could possibly happen instead of what the process is going to be.
Yes, 100%. And I had no idea, and I was fucking embarrassed. I thought
Yeah.
like this was the end of my life. Like
Yeah.
like this is who the fuck goes to rehab? Like, am I that big
Mhm.
of a loser?
Right.
And that's what was going on in my head, right? And the shame, the
Yeah.
guilt, and the anxiety. I was petrified.
Right. And yeah, this reminds me of 2 or 3 years before I ended up going to treatment when I was essentially in my lowest point, was talking to my mom about it, and she knew. She was like, "I've got this place you could go."
Yeah,
And I was like, "Well," I knew deep down that I wasn't ready to stop drinking yet.
yeah,
Like, I just wasn't ready, but I wanted to. I thought maybe just talking about it with her and then maybe going through some of the steps to make it seem like I was okay and kind of putting on that mask and pretending
yeah.
was gonna make it all okay, right? But that's because I wasn't ready,
Absolutely.
right? And I think that's a major, major point for a lot of people who are in addiction is they need to be ready for themselves, right? For to go, to make it last, to wanna do the work that you do at treatment, and then when you get out and all that kind of stuff. And that doesn't mean you can't do it if you're not at that point when you go, but
Yeah,
sometimes at some time you have to find that, right?
absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. It's a huge, totally different mindset of like what you described versus what I was going in the
Mhm.
first time. Cause you're right. Like I'm a firm believer for like myself. And I think a lot of other addicts, alcoholics that I met, it's like, you could do whatever the fuck you want, whatever you say, whatever you want. If they are not able to find that despair, helplessness, whatever it is, or that
Mhm.
fire to want it, it's not going to work. And
Mhm.
me in particular, just ain't
Yeah.
going to work.
Right. Right. And then there is like, I do wanna say that you don't have to hit rock bottom though,
Yeah.
right? Like, if there's a way that you can see something like this or someone else or read a book or whatever it is
Yeah.
that can spark that change and stop you beforehand,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's a possibility too. It just
100%.
there's just something that you need to find or look for or be presented with that can make you see the outcomes. And like for me, it was that class that I ended up being
Yeah.
enrolled in because 2 years later, here I am. The coaching season stops. I just have school. I've got all this free time. But instead of me framing houses and just going to work and then drinking, this time I'm in a class that's all about health and wellness. Like
Yeah.
that's all it is. So I'm going there and I'm doing the same things outside that class with all that free time. I'm drinking, I'm doing whatever. But then I'm going to that class. And luckily I kept going to that class
Mhm.
because it started to make me see that how much it's correlated. And it's like, I know exactly where I'm headed if I keep doing this.
Right.
And that's into that darkness, into that cave,
Yeah.
right? So that's where I started to try to tone it down, to just stop, just say no,
Yeah.
right? and, or exclude myself, take myself away from situations, and then think, okay, I've gone 10, 12 days. I'm good. But then I go out, I try to keep it under control, doesn't happen. And then that's where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I've tried this, I've tried that. I'm scared shitless of treatment. I don't know what it is. I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know what I'm going to be when I come out,
Yeah.
but what does it matter? Because it can't be any worse than this right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's just it, right? And I think it's like you said, if someone hears or sees something or whatever it is, but I'm a firm believer, like for me, it's like planting the seed, right?
Yes.
Like I don't think any of the therapy I've done or help I've received instantly was like, okay, boom. It was always like time would pass and then it would be like a light bulb would go off in the session I had 3 weeks prior. It finally would click in. And then like another 3 weeks would go by and then the light bulb would go off again. And so like planting that seed, I think is so important. Um, if someone's stuck in it, because let's face it, if we're in active addiction like myself, I'm an insane person, 100%. This is just not working properly. But if you can get something in there, and then when you're in those dark moments and you're feeling a certain way, maybe that little glimmer of light or that word or whatever was said just kind of triggers something, right? That's how I kind of looked at it. Cause I know for me, that's how I received it.
Right. Okay, we're back. I realized that I've been recording on the computer mic the whole time, so this quite expensive microphone is just for show, but we're gonna keep it here for the remainders, just to make it look professional. Um, so okay, so we were in treatment. What what was your first what were your first couple days like?
So first couple days were pretty agonizing. Some pretty bad withdrawal. Um, I was just pretty much in bed for 3 days and was just going through it. And was just really like anxiety was 10 out of 10. Depression was 10 out of 10. It was just like, holy fuck. I cannot believe this is where my life has gotten me.
Mhm.
And just like scared too. Like, what the fuck is this? And like, you know, these people here. And,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was really just like, I don't know. I was just fucking terrified.
Right. And then you go through the detox thing and then you get
Yeah.
back into the gen pop.
Yes.
We, as we joked, called ourselves inmates all the time and whatever. And then what were the first couple things they had you doing? Like what were the other people like? How did that go?
Yeah, so it was great. It was actually a smaller group when I first got there. I think there might have been just 8 or 9 of us. It was pretty quiet and it was very eye-opening for me. The biggest thing I remember was seeing the staff and these bright, vibrant people. And I just remember like the first thing I thought was like, how the fuck are these guys that way with like no drugs or alcohol? Like it blew my mind. I'm like, something's weird here. But they were so amazing and they just like, when you know someone
Yeah.
who's truly sober, they have a glow
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah.
They like have gratitude and they just like exude it.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, that was like weird.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what's going on with this guy, but I kind of like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was just, I think the first 2 weeks for me was really, it took 2 weeks for me to get over, like, withdrawal and come to, like, the cloudiness fade away and really just not think about running away every day and
Hmm.
planning what liquor store I'm gonna go to or how I'm gonna get the fuck out of there. Um, so really 2 weeks was a write-off for me. And then the magic started happening, right? I
Yeah.
started to engage. I started to really listen and hear these things that I'd never heard before, like recovery, sobriety, and then learn about, myself.
Right.
Is the longest I had been sober in, like, a long time, right? And be in a safe environment where I could really start to speak on who Matt really is and these giant things that I've hid and held on to my whole life. And so it was really like a total eye-opening experience for me. I'd never been exposed to that level of, like, learning about what's going on with me, why I am this way. And I mean, it was the first time I discovered what anxiety was. As pathetic
Yes.
as that is, it was 24 years old. I didn't know what anxiety was. And I
Yeah.
realized that's that feeling I've had my whole life. Um, but that's the truth. And
Yeah.
so learning about myself and all those different things and how to address the wreckage, um, that we left in our lives and how to live properly, without drugs and alcohol and yeah, so really just like a lot of learning, which I did
Right.
not expect.
Right. You're in this you're in this darkness and you see these other people who are like, okay, you guys were once here. How the hell are you the way you are now? Right. Like, how are you the complete opposite? So it starts to have an influence on you, right? And you
Yeah,
start to think, okay, well, maybe there is something here. And
yes,
then the processes and the exercises and the community aspect and the talking about it and learning what anxiety is. And
yeah,
for me, it was like being vulnerable and like
yeah,
allowing myself to share these things and like in a completely different world that we grew up in and that we
yeah,
were in for so long. Right.
yeah,
And it was just such a freeing experience. And
yeah,
like, and then that other point you made about you're in one place and there's only one focus.
hmm,
You're away from the outside world. You're in a safe place, but those distractions you can leave out there and
yeah,
all that stuff you can leave out there. And you're finally just in a place where you can be yourself, right?
exactly,
And you can learn what things you're holding on to and what fucked you up and all that kind of stuff. And you can, if you look at it the right way, you can come out of there with, instead of that shame and guilt, but the feeling of blessing and like sobriety and all that kind of thing. And I think
absolutely,
that's what those people who work there or the people who are sober and happy and all that kind of stuff is they're living the blessing that is sobriety.
yes,
Right? They've gone through it. They've been in the dark places. They know what that is, but now they see the other side
yeah,
and they see how good it can be if you're able to put in work to heal yourself and come out and like that's the blessing that sobriety is,
totally,
right?
totally, yeah. And it's the key thing that you said there is safe place, and also,
Right.
like, you're putting a pause on your life.
Yeah.
You're putting pause on your life because you need to,
Yeah.
and you need, like, a total reset.
Mhm.
Um, I had to relearn how to live life. That's how I look at treatment. It's like a relearning
Yeah. Exactly. Like how you interact with people, all that kind of stuff.
everything, everything.
Right. And like that was, I think that was the best, one of the best parts of it was like, you've got nothing else to think about except
Yeah,
how you're going to move forward from here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you said too, like, you felt comfortable, and I know, like, I felt the same, and it was honestly the first time in my life I was in a room with people that I felt like at home, like I
Mhm.
belonged. And
Mhm.
it took a few days for sure,
Yeah.
but it was like the things they were saying was what I was feeling. And they're like, "Oh, you've done this? Yeah, I did that too." Or, I relate to that. I'm like, nobody I know relates to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's the first time in my life I felt a sense of true belonging, for not like in the dressing room, like this is Matt, this is who Matt is, and
Mm.
this guy is just like me.
Yeah.
So that was a really like uh incredible experience to have that feeling.
Right. And like, I think that's something that can scare people away from it is, well, I don't know who's going to be in there. It's like
Yeah,
people just like you,
exactly.
whatever walk of life they come from,
Yeah.
like whatever their background is, it's like you're going to relate because you have the same underlying problem.
And that's actually one thing that I'm fascinated with is
Hmm.
through my experience in sobriety and treatments and meetings or whatever it is,
Hmm.
how I can relate to someone who total different walk of life. He's
Yep.
an old man,
Yeah.
but this motherfucker will speak exactly what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like you can't explain that without feeling it, right? And I will never forget the first time that happened to me in an AA meeting, and it just like blew my mind, right? And
Yeah.
that's when it was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm where I need to be.
Exactly. Right. That instant connection where you can be like, okay, I get this guy. This guy gets me.
Yeah,
We can talk about this,
absolutely.
and I'm not getting judged.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. So we're there, and then is this? So once you go for 45 days there, then you get out. Is this the period you had mentioned where you go for a year of being kind of the dry drunk or white knuckling it, or?
It was a little bit after.
Mhm.
I mean, I definitely had a few relapses out of treatment quite quickly, like within the first 3 months, first six
Okay.
months. I
Yeah.
think, I came out like Captain Recovery and
Yeah.
was doing a million things and was like really regimented um, but, really, I went through that phase in treatment and I got a lot off my chest,
Mhm.
but I was still in the mindset where I would tell you stuff, but I'm not gonna tell you that deep, dark stuff.
Right.
So I still hung on to a little bit of secrets.
Right.
Um, And I think coming out, I bought into the program, but I still held back just enough because I don't think I was ready.
Right.
Um, and that led to some relapses, and it led to a lot of frustration internally because I'm like, why am I not feeling good? Why is my life not falling into place? Right?
Mhm.
It's almost like same, but different. I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
Um, so I put a year together after relapsing for probably a year
Yeah.
and making not a lot of progress. And then I just white knuckled a good year, and I was fucking miserable.
Yeah.
It was actually awful. Because I feel like I had a lot of my symptoms were really manifesting themselves in just different ways. And I just wasn't drinking.
Right.
Um, and it was frustrating. It was confusing. Um, and yeah, that
So,
was a good
yeah.
year.
So you went to treatment, but you kinda only waded in waist deep.
Yes,
You
exactly.
didn't, and instead of going all the way head under, you just kinda walked in, got what you needed to get,
Yep.
and then you walked out and was like, "Okay, well, that felt good, but I'm not really quite there yet."
Yeah. And
Right?
I didn't listen.
Right.
right? And everything those guys told me would happen if I didn't do what I needed to do happened,
Yeah.
right? The
Right.
relapses, the progressiveness, like you're going to pick up where you left off and
Mhm.
it's going to be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
And there's that. I don't did they talk about the pink cloud,
yeah,
right? So, like, everything's great and everything's
yeah,
awesome for the short amount of time, whatever it is,
yeah,
right? And then something happens and all of a sudden it's gone and you're like,
exactly.
"I'm back into real life,"
Yep,
right? And
exactly.
that's where we differ a little bit because I was so done and I was so ready for
Yeah,
something else that when I went, it was like, I'm first day, okay, what do I have to do?
yeah,
Like, like
yeah,
I'm cannonball on deep diving into this lake. Like,
for sure.
tell me what I need to do.
Yeah,
And like obviously it took some time to get comfortable opening up and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff, but I knew that I was ready.
yeah, for
So,
sure.
right. So then you go to for the second time and you say you're scared of going back.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, what really happened was after that year of not drinking, not true sobriety, just not drinking. I came to an ultimatum in my head. I'm like, if this is what it is, being sober, I'm not doing it because this is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I decided I was gonna go back out, not just hide the relapse, the odd relapse here. It was gonna be just I'm going out. But
Hmm.
I also created a good um, justification in my head because I lost weight. I became obsessed
Yeah.
with working out and which was really just like a obsessive compulsive perfectionism mechanism that I have inside of me. And I'm like, I'm not like those guys. Look at me. I don't drink anymore. I've repaired my finances a little bit and lost all this weight. Like I'm good.
Right.
So I went back out and I went back out hard. Um, and just like they tell you in treatment and it's progressive and it's only going to get worse. And for me, it really shocked me how quickly it progressed for me and how quickly I the wheels fell off the wagon. Within a matter of 3 months of being back into it, I was where I was before, in terms of moods, depression, anxiety, but my consumption had skyrocketed. Um, it just, it was insane how much I was putting back and still functioning. It was
Yeah.
becoming a very dangerous amount regularly.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went back to that dark place where for me it involves being alone.
Yeah.
I cut everyone out again. I isolated and again, you're back to that idea of, um, I don't want to live this life any longer and
Yeah.
looking for a way out.
Right. And like the perfect example of you get yourself together and you think you're good and you think it's going to be different.
Yes. Yep.
Never.
And I tried everything. Like I said, I didn't drink certain things because that was the old me. So I
Right.
only drank certain things this time.
Hmm.
The justification, I only did it on weekends at the start. It's like, okay, it's only
Yeah.
weekends, right? I'm not drinking
Yeah.
every day like I was before, but it progressed very quickly. And the destruction, that I caused in my life was much, much more this time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it became a conversation because my parents would see it. They started to see the signs and um, they really tried to intervene and were asking questions and started bringing up, going back to treatment and I didn't want any of it.
Yeah.
I didn't want any of it. I wasn't going to be a two-time rehab champ. And yeah, I was just, I didn't want anyone stopping me.
Right.
Um,
You think, yeah, I mean, I remember doing the same things, right? You just, okay, I've got it together this time.
Yep.
It's not going to get a hold of me. Right. And then, but the ones who are closest to you, they know,
Yep.
right? And they know you're trying to fool yourself,
Yeah.
but it's so easy to try and fool yourself or think you're fooling yourself. But as soon as someone close to you who knows you, like, they're gonna see it instantly, right?
100%. And and
Right.
and I think too, like, it's one thing I'll say that I think is really important. Um, I genuinely believed I had it beat. Like, it wasn't like a little bit. It wasn't
Yeah.
like you're yeah, we're fooling ourselves. But if you put me on a polygraph test, I 100% would have passed. I got it under control. And I think that's the cunning, baffling side of this is, you know, I had myself fooled,
Yeah.
and the addiction just, it had me. It
Yeah.
fucking had me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It reached the top of the mountain.
Yep.
It had you in thinking that you can continue and nothing's gonna happen,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think that's something that is a big thing with a lot of people is, "Oh, no, I'm okay. I
Yeah.
know." Like, people who they kinda have a little idea that, okay, maybe that I do have a little bit of an issue, but maybe I just need to take a time off. But then it just keeps repeating the cycle over and over again, right? Like, oh, I
Absolutely.
take a week off and I feel good, and then I do it, and then I feel bad. And then I
Yeah.
take, okay, maybe it's 3 months. It's like, that's the hardest thing, is to just understand that the problem is the substance,
Yeah.
right?
You can't make any progress until you take the substance away. As
100%.
long as that substance is involved, your mechanism up here is all fucked up.
Right.
Right. And I think, like I said, you can plant those seeds, but yeah, without removing that, I don't stand a chance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I learned too, is through my trials and errors, was that's not going to happen. It's okay. I tried. I got to get rid of this thing. And how am I going to do
Yeah.
that? I need to take myself away
Yeah.
and solve this. Like,
Yeah.
ask for help. I think that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing, is that asking for help and getting help from professionals and people who know what they're doing. Right.
Yeah. 100%. And you hit the nail on the head. It's the professionals. I'm
Right.
a big believer in, you need to talk to people who know what they're doing and are around it, because
Yeah.
they see it all the time. And like, our stories are all unique and different, but really at our cores, it's a lot of the same parallels, right? Whether it's the habits, the rituals, the traumas, how we go about medicating that. So it's super important.
Yeah. Okay. So you get over that fear of the two-time champ,
Well,
and
I kind of got forced to get over the
forced
fear.
into.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I started having some health issues. I actually went into a couple withdrawal seizures that put me in
Okay.
the hospital.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really where it got to for me. It was like I was physically dependent, and my body had I was powerless. I was helpless, right? Like, I had no control over what my body was doing. It was just that was it, right?
Yeah.
So I reached a new level of despair and helplessness. And it was the first time for me that that invincibility cloak I'd been wearing, being so highly functioning and able to keep going and going, it
Yeah.
was gone. And it was very clear to me that it was off. And
Yeah.
it was a new feeling for me, that level of helplessness, um, there. So that kind of was when I I told my mom what was going on and how bad it was and what was
Yeah.
going on with my health there. And I was fortunate enough that I was willing to go back at that point.
Right. So what was your mindset like the second time?
Well, this time, Browner, um, I felt, I honestly I was really scared, and that feeling of helplessness, despair had finally sunk in for me. And
Mhm.
I was I was someone who really did a lot of research around addiction, and I took psychology classes. So I actually had an idea of what was going on with me, and I'd reached this new point of no going back, and like, how
Yeah.
far can I keep pushing that scale? Right. Well, withdrawal seizures, like that's how you fucking die. And
Yeah.
I'm like, where's this going to end? Right. And it just started to sink in for me. And I was genuinely scared because at, at that time, started to sink in that I had no control over this. And this was like, I'm going to be the reason I die. Like I'm going to
Yeah.
put enough in me and I can't control it, and that's it for me. And it started to really sink in, and it scared me. And I started thinking about how that would affect, my family, and how I started to expose that selfishness and self-centeredness that I didn't want to acknowledge. And
Yes.
so I went into treatment this time, and I was like, look, I know nothing. Take my hand and walk me through it and tell me what I need to do, and I'm going to do it, because
Beautiful.
I'm fucking terrified of what happened to me and where I'm going, and I'm sick of feeling this way. Um so yeah, just guide me through. I'll do whatever you say. And that was
And
the mindset.
what day was that?
Well, again, it was about 2 weeks for me to really clear up again.
Okay.
It just
Yeah,
worked
yeah.
out that way. But I definitely say, like, within few 4 or 5 days, I've still
Yeah.
had that mindset. Like, I'm not here to fuck around. Like, I need help. I need it bad. Like,
Yeah.
sorry guys, I know you're here and I want you to do well, but I need help.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
so yeah, it was pretty early.
What what's your sobriety date?
So I'm 2 years, 4 months.
2 years, 4 months?
Yeah, August 10th. Yeah,
August 10th. Okay,
yeah.
so that was 2020
2020. No,
2020
2021.
2021?
Yeah. Is
Okay.
that my math right on that? I
I'm
think it
not
was
much
2021. Yeah.
I'm not much better. Too couple hockey guys, too many conkies, and too many beverages trying to do
Yeah.
math.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, okay, so that and you've been sober since,
Correct. Yeah.
right? And so this second time you you tried it once, you got something out of it, you went back, but then this second time, right? You didn't give up, you didn't quit. You went back and
Yeah.
now this time lasted. So what do you think was the biggest thing that made this time stick? I know you talked
Yeah.
about some of those. Like, was there anything that you went through in treatment the second time that did you open up that last
Yeah.
little bit?
I think it was, uh, I look at life now, and I feel like the first trip was such a blessing, because
Mhm.
I learned so much, and I'm actually very grateful that I did go back out. And,
Yeah.
um, for me, it was surrender. I had to surrender that, this is who I am. This is
Mhm.
a big problem. So with surrender, acceptance,
Yeah.
understanding that I'm just this way. And if I want to figure out how to live a happy, healthy life, I need to listen to the people that have done it, are professionals, and I need to find something that works for me. It's
Right.
But the surrender thing was huge, because up to that point I still had my will in my hands, and ego was involved,
Yeah.
but I just was I was desperate.
right. And you give in, and sometimes it's referred to like there's the higher power
Yep.
and that kind of stuff. And that higher power was something that took me a while to figure out.
Yeah.
Because I was never really a religious person before. If anything, I thought like, well, what is how do you believe this stuff? But
Yeah.
you go in there and you surrender yourself to it, and you just understand that maybe there is something else out there that is in charge. It doesn't need to be a god or whatever it is, but
Yeah.
it just lets you have another level of feeling that freedom from like, it's all your fault.
Yeah. And, or even like, for me, I'm not in control, right? Like,
Yeah.
period. It's just like, what's going to be is what's going to be. It's up to me to make sure that, um, for me, like, I believe in, I'm trying to live by God's will, not
Yeah.
mine. I know where mine gets me, right? Like,
Yeah.
I get loaded because I want things my way, and they
Yeah.
won't go my way because that's life.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I became quite spiritual, and like you, I had no religious history,
Yeah.
never understood it, but I did have these profound moments in my life that I started to look at, and I'm like, am I really that? Is it really that big of a coincidence that these things all lined up, or that I'm still here, or that I survived this and made it through that?
Yeah.
I don't know, right? But just working at it, and consistency working at it, and working to deepen that connection has been
Right.
huge for me.
Right. And so, yeah. And like it can be whatever for anybody, right? Like that
Absolutely.
was like, I think I talk about it where I'm like, all right, I'll go to this place mall, but I don't want to come out being a Bible thumper.
Yeah.
Right. But I also had no, I understand what religion is based on now. It's a set of principles and guidelines that you live
Yep.
by in order to try to live life correctly. Right. So now myself, I just kind of like, I haven't, I'm not, I don't worship any God or anything like that, but it's just like the simple fact in knowing that I think there is something out there,
Yep.
and things happen for a reason.
Yep.
And if you put your mind towards a positive like path, that it's going to benefit you. Right.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
so I think that's the spirituality. Like people still get weirded out by that word sometimes,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to. Like it can be whatever you want it to be.
100%.
Right.
100%. And I look at it just as like deepening my connection with myself, and,
Hmm.
my mind, body, spirit. But like you said, it can be anything. I think it's more the understanding that it's something,
Yeah.
right? And um, I just submitted to that idea, and every day just focused on it every
Yeah.
single day. Like, I'm not in charge. There's something out there. And
Yeah.
over time, I don't know how to explain it. It's just life got better,
Yeah.
and things just started coming my way. And I really believe that's where the healing really started for me, because I just
Yeah.
felt like this weight was lifted.
Right. Right. So that's the beginning. And then we get out, and now we've got 2+ years of recovery. And what what have you kind of been doing, and where are you now, and what are some things that you keep doing to keep that positivity going?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's I think the thing is important to note is, like, treatment is great, and it can be a scary place to go, but it's also a very safe place. And
Mhm.
it's almost, in my opinion, it sounds a little weird, but it's the easy part of
Yes.
recovery, because when you get out, you're right back. If you go back to where you were before, you're right back where, The liquor store you used to go to is right around the corner. The bar you drive by, you can place 1,000 memories to it.
Yeah.
The people you bump into, there's so many uncontrollables of life, and you've got to be prepared and willing to navigate that when it comes.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, like having a solid routine and having things in place, I had a very good idea what I needed to do. And for me, I had to really buckle down, and this was what I was doing, going to these meetings. I was going to work, I was
Yeah.
working on myself, and I was coming home. I wasn't going out. I couldn't be in a restaurant. I couldn't be near a bar. That was me. I knew I
Yeah.
needed distance. I had to have distance and really dedicate myself to what I was told and what I needed to do. And I did that
Mhm.
for, 8 months, and it just, life just became really, really enjoyable. And I
Yeah.
started having opportunities come to me that I never thought I'd be doing, changing my job, um, being around healthier people. And, and yeah, like that was it. I knew one thing for sure. I had to figure out a way to be comfortable in a restaurant, in a bar, in a
Yes.
lounge, a nightclub. And that was big for me because I didn't think I'd be okay with being the person who couldn't go to that because it ruled me, right?
Yeah.
And slowly I started to, go to these places, but have a plan.
Yeah.
Have a plan, and I'm not gonna go out if I have a bad week and
Yeah.
things are going on in my life. It's just not a good idea, period. But if I'm good and I'm taking care of myself and I can go and I'm fine, right? It's good. I'm not gonna drink. I don't need to.
Right.
Um,
And yeah, so you came out with a plan, and that is a big part of treatment
yeah,
is recovery planning that you figure out. They don't just kick you out the door. They're like, "Okay,
yeah,
where are you going? What are you doing?"
yeah,
And so that was my thing was I had that inner competitiveness. Like I was like, "Okay, I've gone and I've done this and I've shown my family and my friends that I'm serious about it.
hmm,
Now I'm going to make sure that I continue this.
yeah,
Like I don't want to go back and, oh, well, he's still the same. It's like, no, I have changed and we can change. So like that was a big motivating factor behind
yeah,
me and when I got out and the biggest thing I thought was I didn't want to give it any more time. Like it had taken so much time away
yeah,
from my life. So my biggest thing was I was going to find something that I can put that time into
yeah,
and stay focused like that. And I also need to understand that we live in a world surrounded by alcohol, like you talked about
yeah,
restaurants, bars, and I don't want to not be able to go and do things because it's there.
yeah,
And like for some people, they might think like just going to dinner and not having a drink. It's like, you don't you don't really understand the level of how hard that was
hundred
before,
percent, yeah,
right? Like to go to a pub and just have a Coke, I would be like, why am I here? Right.
100%,
So
yeah,
it's like those are the things that you need to I needed to understand for myself. And like I saw it as like a challenge. Like,
hmm,
is it the healthiest way? Were they very skeptical when I was in treatment and I was telling them that this was the route I was going to take?
yeah,
Of course they were. But like as I was able to explain myself and talk about it, they're like, okay, well, if this is going to be the best for you, then I think that is a good way for you to do it.
yeah,
Right. And this is exactly two different people who have related to a lot of the same things, but the solution is different. Right. And like that's one of the big things is like each person, even though they've gone through a lot of the same stuff, have a lot of the same things, they might have a different solution. So like, that's one thing I want people to know is y- you might need help finding it, but there is a solution that'll work for you.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in what you just said. I think that there is no one direction for recovery. I think it's
Mhm.
finding what works best for you. And
Right.
I think whatever works, works. Stick to it.
Exactly.
But it's gotta be
Exactly.
something, right?
Yeah.
You gotta have a plan, I think is the big thing. And you gotta have, a team or an outlet when things are going wrong or you have
Mhm.
things come up. You gotta know how to deal with it
Yeah.
because what I've learned is they're gonna keep coming up. It's
Mhm.
just a matter of managing and making sure I'm taking care of myself and
Yeah.
doing the right things so that when they do come up, it's like, oh, I know what this is. I know how to deal with that. It's good.
Right.
Go away now. Um, but yeah, cause
Yeah.
and I remember thinking like I was going to be this healed, changed person, but that's not the case. It's like healing for me has been a journey and it's like
Yeah.
I'm still a work in progress and I have to constantly keep after it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the blessings is I come out of there and I'm like, there is so much that I can still learn and
Yeah.
still absorb and still figure out. And
Yeah.
it's like you go through these chapters in life and maybe they chip a little bit off of you, maybe they add to you. But it's like that's one thing that I've really absorbed is like moving forward, like there's never a time where you're not going to be able to learn something from someone, whether it
Yeah.
is good or bad,
Yeah.
right? And that's one of the other blessings that you can see that. And it's not, oh, well, so and so is doing this over that, and that's affecting me. And
Yeah.
why are they doing this way? And it's like focusing, control what you can control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if that's controlling the situations that you put yourself in at the start, then that's what you do.
Hmm.
If it's controlling whether you'll read the news, because that might send you into a spin, right?
Yeah.
It's all that kind of stuff that you need to just understand is, okay, I'm going to control what I can control and I'm going to do what is best for me.
Yeah.
It's you're selfish in your addiction, but I also find you need to be a little bit selfish in your recovery,
Have to be.
right?
Have to
And
be.
that was something that I found was like some few of the people are like, I'm gonna get out of here and I'm gonna help other people and I'm gonna do all this and I'm gonna do all that and and I was just like, I was, I looked at them. Yes, this is a judgment, but I looked at them and I was like, I'm worried about you because I think you need to think about yourself and get
Yep.
yourself figured out before you go on to that next thing. And that's kind of what I talk about at the start of my podcast is like, I told myself 5 years. I said, I'm not gonna try and help and fix. So I shouldn't say not gonna not, but I know that I need to get myself together
Yeah.
for 5 years. Right. And I think that might be, especially like in the social media world and all that kind of stuff. You see all these other people like, do these 5 things and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, but we need to get ourselves right.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not sitting here saying I'm perfect or anything. You can ask my wife. She's like, she'll pick me apart on certain things,
I get you. Yeah.
but it's like, worry about yourself first, and then you can go out and help others. And I think that's kind of what we talked about too, is you want to start to help those other people, right?
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
and you don't want to hide behind it, right? There's nothing to hide from, right? It's truth. Sure. Is it stigmatized a little bit still? Yes. But now you're in a good spot and you can go out there and we can have this conversation and we can hopefully reach other people who might be somewhere along that journey that we've just talked about.
Yeah.
Right.
There's so much truth to taking care of yourself, making sure yourself is good in sobriety, because I think I'm one of those people for sure. Like I love to help people. And I was someone
Mhm.
who my whole life
Yeah.
gave everything I could to everyone else, and I never gave it to myself. Right.
Right.
And I was fortunate. I recognized that in early sobriety, because when you do get yourself taken care of and you get time and you learn about yourself, get better, it's like, well, once your cup is filled, everything else can go to everyone else and you're good. You have the energy to do it. And it's all just unconditional, great stuff to go around. Right.
Yeah.
But it's easy for me to just give to others and not look inside. You got to go inside first, do that shit, or else it's just going to get put on the back burner.
Exactly. Exactly. So you're living in Florida now.
Yes, brother.
You're living in Florida. You're doing real estate and
Yeah.
managing. How's that going?
It's going really well. I still have to pinch myself at times, Browner, like where I am and what I'm doing is just like so far from anything I thought I was capable of or
Yeah.
could have like envisioned for myself. And um it's really cool, like trying to build a business in real estate. The market's really exciting here, and kind of trying to figure out where I fit into things and navigating that and and managing at Lululemon. Lululemon's been a blessing for me. Being able to work there and the experience I've had has just been like more than I ever could have bargained for. But like being social every day, being forced to be
Yeah.
social every day was it was huge for me
Yeah.
in early recovery. And yeah, it's turned me into a introverted extrovert. Like I
Right.
find I'm charged up by people now, and
Yeah.
it's wild because a couple of years ago it would have just been way too much for me to even entertain. Um, being social, sober, and being
Yeah.
able to give what I can to people. Right.
Right. Like you said, man, your cup is full. So
Exactly.
you can start to give it out to other people.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're about an hour and 50 minutes into this. Um, is there anything? I think we covered the majority of the topics that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. I think
Is
that went
there,
really well, man. If there's anything more you want to touch on, I'm free game.
yeah,
But
is there kind of a last little message that you kind of want to give out there?
I think the message I always try to convey is, just the importance in general to lead with kindness to people. It's just you never know what someone is going through. And I can honestly speak from being on the dark side of things and being so lonely and have all these things going on in my head and my body and these chemicals in me. And I remember a few times, it didn't happen often, but I remember the impact that amidst all the shit going on here, someone took time to just sit and talk with me or ask me how I was doing, what was going on. And it was random people, but it just took my mind off it for a second. Right. And if you can just be kind to people and lead with curiosity instead of judgment, um, I just think that's so important. And if anyone, is struggling, uh, there's ways to get help. And it might not feel like it, but it can get better. That's the message I would always want to portray, and just keep fighting. And there's other people like you, like us. We're
Exactly.
not that uncommon.
Right. All right, man. Well, that's a great way to end it. Thank you very much for doing this, for reaching out. Um, I know I asked for some people if they were out there to reach out so we could do and have a conversation like this. And if this conversation helped you at all, like I'd love to hear from you. And I want to do more of this, talk to more people, learn about it. Maddie helped me out here, and I think you guys can too. So, with that being said, feel free to reach out, whether that's Instagram, email, whatever it is, right? Don't be scared, even though I know you have that fear, right? This was a great chat. It's been great to catch up with you again,
Mhm.
right? We haven't seen each other for 10 plus years, probably.
Too long.
And we started talking the other day like it was 2 weeks, right? And
Yeah.
if I know you're not, that's totally cool too. But I want to keep growing this thing and building this thing and talk to as many people as I can and go from there. So once again, thanks, Matt.